James Forman Jr., Locking Up Our Own, Crime and Punishment in Black America. In Locking Up Our Own, Crime and Punishment in Black America, author James Forman Jr. dissects the paradox surrounding African American political and social influence in the formulation of law and order, and how this has perpetuated the racial injustices that exist in the United States today. Forman examines the progressive rise of Black political leadership in America, particularly in Washington, D.C., in the 1970s, and how the efforts to curb drugs and violent crime within the African American community have inadvertently led to policies that continue to systemically oppress it. Tackling the paradox of the Black community effectively locking up its own, Forman provides an in-depth analysis of the histories, policies, and circumstances that led to this ironic twist of fate.
D.C.'s Marijuana Reform Act. In 1975, the Washington, D.C. City Council proposed a Marijuana Reform Act to reduce penalties for possession of marijuana, due to concerns about racial injustice. However, the Black community, led by Council Member Doug Moore, opposed the proposal, arguing that easing penalties would make it easier for Black people to succumb to crime and addiction. This opposition was successful, and the Reform Act was tabled. The decision stemmed from the spike in criminal activity during the heroin epidemic in the 1960s, which primarily affected young Black men. Heroin addiction led to increases in crime, which caused outrage in Black communities. Black drug dealers were viewed as betraying their race, and some believed that Black heroin addicts and their passive dependents benefited the white community. Gun control and civil rights. In 1976, the Washington City Council passed stricter gun control laws aimed at protecting Black citizens from gun violence, with the support of victims of gun-related crime and citizens who were angered by the fact that 85% of those killed by guns were Black. The laws banned further sales of guns, mandated the registration of existing ones, and increased maximum sentencing guidelines for people convicted of gun crimes. However, the policy change was not as effective as many people had hoped, as it mostly punished poorly educated Black men from low-income households. The root causes of gun crimes, such as racial inequality in the provision of health care, education, and employment, were not addressed. Black officers and systemic racism. Black officers face hurdles in the police force due to systemic racism, hindering their career advancement and preventing progress in reducing police violence against Black citizens. For much of U.S. history, Black individuals were systematically excluded from positions of authority, particularly in police departments. It wasn't until the late 1940s that Black civilians started to join the police force. But despite these efforts for diversity, racism hindered Black officers' advancement by preventing them from receiving good suitability ratings, requirement for promotion. Two Black officers, Bertell Jefferson and Tillman O'Brien, even formed a secret class to teach Black officers how to score higher on written tests to compensate for their low suitability ratings, eventually leading 12 out of 15 officers to promotion. Despite this advancement, the number of Black officers on the force did not reduce police violence against Black citizens. In fact, a study found that 28% of Black officers were prejudiced or highly prejudiced, while white officers exhibited even more prejudiced behavior. This high percentage of prejudice, in part, resulted from the class divisions between officers who viewed poor Black citizens as a threat to law and order. Thus, systemic racism within the police force hinders the advancement of Black officers and impedes progress in reducing police violence against Black citizens. Washington's War on Drugs. In the late 1930s, all drug crimes in Washington had a minimum one-year sentence, but by the 1970s, drug dealing was rampant despite this. City Council responded by categorizing drugs into groups with specific penalties, with African American Councilmember John Ray proposing stricter sentencing. Although Ray's minimum sentencing proposal was rejected, a ballot in January 1982 established mandatory minimum sentences for drug dealing. Initiative 9 mandated 4 years in prison for dealing heroin, 2 years for selling cocaine, and 1 year for marijuana. Despite having no impact on reducing crime, drug-related prosecutions increased by almost 300% between 1982 and 1984. Ray and Police Chief Bertell Jefferson cleverly capitalized on the public's concern about the thriving drug market and campaigned for Initiative 9 by visiting murder scenes, convincing Washington citizens to vote in favor of the initiative. The rise of warrior policing. In the late 1980s, the war on drugs led to the emergence of warrior policing. Police were trained to see young people in high-crime areas as potential enemies. This approach contradicted the innocent until proven guilty principle in the U.S. Constitution. The author's students in Washington, D.C. had to be mindful of their clothing, speech, and behavior to appear innocent. Crack cocaine, which caused an immediate intense high, was the reason behind the drug-related violence and the rise of warrior policing. The black community was hit the hardest by crack, and many favored heavy-handed policing. In 1989, 90% of homicide victims in Washington, D.C. were black. Racial injustice in Operation Ceasefire. In an effort to reduce homicide rates in D.C., Eric Holder's Operation Ceasefire made stop and search an official police policy. However, the program disproportionately affected black neighborhoods and resulted in the imprisonment of innocent people. Holder knew that young black men in poor areas would be stopped more frequently, and sociologist Ronald Weitzer found that police abuse was more prevalent in lower-class black areas. The stop and search tactic was just another component of the war on drugs that led to the imprisonment of black people.
In summary, James Forman Jr.'s Locking Up Our Own highlights the complexities around African American political involvement, and its well-intended yet unintended consequences in the shaping of crime and punishment policies in Black America. By exploring the various laws and decisions made by Black leaders in the drug war, gun control, and policing, Forman creates opportunities to understand the roots of systemic racial injustice and how the urge to protect the Black community has, at times, paradoxically harmed it. This book offers powerful insight into the circumstances that have led to the disproportionate imprisonment of Black Americans, and challenges readers to rethink the role of African American leadership in crafting policies that contribute to systemic injustice.